Aloha, everyone. We are coming back. We have a phenomenal crowd of 27 people still staying with us today. And we are grateful for them. And we hope you enjoyed your meal, whatever time of the day you were at and whatever you had. If I can ask our afternoon panelists to come down. A couple other things I will note. The Greenhaven film, again, as I said, is if you contact the filmmakers, it may be available. And they have a GoFundMe page because the film is still in the works. So I just want you to know, if you go to, just Google it, you'll find it. But they can, if you can help, they'll be happy to have your help. That would be terrific. Otherwise, we're going to move into our afternoon discussion. Everybody abandoned you?
Yeah, I'm gonna speak all three parts. I watched the film this morning and I realized that I could actually do it.
So you're gonna ask yourself questions?
I will be asking and answering questions on behalf of the panelists.
Okay, and for those of you in the virtual world out there, I see we've got some questions. It says, hi, did video stop? So yes, hopefully it's back on. We've got a comment already, or a couple comments already. What we will do, Sarah is in the back with her laptop open, and when we get to Q&A, she'll see if there's a question from you all that pertains to what's happening. She'll raise her hand as if she were you. I'm speaking to the folks online. And we'll try to make that work. We're gonna mainly have our speakers speak, but we'll have some time. And of course, we've got the folks in the room. So we'll try to integrate. If you have a comment, we'll share them rather than a question. And again, I'm speaking to the folks online. If you have a comment, we'll share them with the folks later. Looks like we're coming close. I need tech help because we just went off of the screen. View, my view, attendee view, follow, speaker. Sorry, folks, you just got Jessica's computer coming up. Okay, I think you are back. What are you seeing? Are you seeing the?
Everything looks good.
Everything looks good. I'm going to take that as a great thing to hear. And so excited. And I'm going to turn this way. I guess I can see. No. We're good. You're up. Thank you, everybody.
Welcome to our afternoon session. I'm Justin Levinson. I'll be moderating. It is my great pleasure to welcome two of our featured special guests today. Kaori Sakagami, the director of the first film you saw today. And Dr. Roy Bolus is here as well, who is heavily featured in the second film you saw today. It's a personal pet peeve of mine. I don't read bios when bios have been distributed, so everybody can consult the biographies. I want to jump right in, and we can, obviously, we'll be contextualizing from the bios quite a bit. I do hope to do a couple of things in this section, and hopefully we can involve the audience as well. But one of the really fascinating pieces of this session is the cross-cultural nature of the films that you've seen and the life experiences that we've all witnessed, and thinking about some of the themes that emerge through the film project and through lived experience as well. And hopefully we'll be able to draw out some of those. I hope to just say a few words and acknowledge that our local criminal justice system and prison population is not part of this panel. We have experts coming up later in the day who will be talking about our local issues, but it's hard to do a panel without recognizing that we have problems in our criminal justice system. Because we were screening films, I wanted to note that there was a 2017 film produced by one of our alums, Bill Bassett, called Out of State. That was a documentary that followed two Native Hawaiian prisoners who were sent to private prison in Arizona, as Hawaii tends to do, and how they discovered and connected with their cultural heritage while out of state, and then the film follows them back home as they work on reintegration and follow some of their challenges there. So I did want to announce that and make sure that people are aware of that film project. Okay, so I want to jump into a couple themes, but I do have a filmmaker question first for you, Kaori, if you don't mind, because I think when people like me see a film and we're not filmmakers, we don't really understand what comes into it. But I think most of us understand with a documentary film that everything that's in there, from the large scale organization, the way it's organized, to this small scale organization, the choices of what quotes to put in and what scenes to show and when to show them, all of those things are part of a very thoughtful, intentional process that you went through. How did you decide what you wanted to do with this film after spending so much time?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming here and virtual too. And thank you for having invited me over to Hawaii. And one of my dreams, like a list, has kind of completed here. So thank you so much for having me. Okay, the question you addressed, it's very difficult to go into detail, but roughly, it took 10 years for me to complete this film. And 6 years alone just to get the permit to go into the prison and to shoot. So 6 years, it's a long time, right? And another 2 years for shooting. But I was completely like watched by at least 2 guards. But sometimes when I look back, there are like 6, 7 guards looking down from the second floor and first floor and all over. So you have to know that I have no really like freedom of movement, or even when we shoot. Well, I had a cameraman, the professional cameraman, maybe 5, 6 times out of 2 years. So I don't have a big budget. I'm very limited in the budget. I kind of paid out of my pocket. So I shot most of it, and the goods, like the really visually good scenes, were done by professional cameramen that I couldn't afford bringing him. So anyway, he was really upset at the early stage, anyways, because we were controlled totally, and the guards will come to our camera and like look into the finder, and which professional camera never let you do. And but I mean, without any question or anything, just the guards will come and look into the finder and say, no, you cannot shoot this. And you can shoot this way, but not here. And then when I ask them the questions like, okay, why? The question of why could be a challenge to guards. So I learned it very quickly in the first month. I tried to ask some questions properly and very politely, but the guards were like really rude to me. And in addition to being a like independent filmmaker, I'm also a woman, right? And that really was a problem for the guards, because the male prison is totally dominated by male officers. Out of 200 officers, I would say 1 or 2 women officers that I saw during the 2-year period. Okay, so they didn't know how to handle with me. Yeah, so it was very, very difficult to shoot, and that situation upsets my professional cameraman. So he said, "Well, let's abandon this. Well, maybe we should wait another warden who will be understanding and generous to us to let us film." I said, "No, it took 6 years just to get this, you know." I didn't want to go for another 6 years, so I had to like come to terms with the conditions, horrible conditions that I had to tolerate. Anyway, so that and editing also was very difficult for me, because as you see, your wonderful film has a wonderful expression of people, but my film only got like the people, like graduates of TC. The scenes, 2 scenes that I had, and also the very end, when Taku actually came out of the prison, he had a face open. But those scenes were kind of try to be illuminated by the Ministry of Justice when we had to go through the screening at the end, which that's really, I didn't want to have the screening with the ministry, but that was a kind of condition to make a film. I had this contract with the Ministry of Justice. All the elements were good for them, but for us, it's like, oh, it's like editorial control was totally like not on us, but not I don't know how to put it. Editorial control was us, but there are some things that are very tricky, very tricky. Anyway, so the editing process was really hard too, and also face has to be disclosed, like that disguised, and that's not the decision of inmates. That's decision of Ministry of Justice that they have a policy of no-show faces. So, and I had a few contracts for those people who came out of prison who agreed upon exposing their faces, but it didn't matter to ministry. And I argued and I tried to convince them, like, no. So, I mean, this is just a little, pieces of struggle that I had, but I had to go through this hell of 10 years.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing. So Roy, I wanted to start by asking you a couple of questions about your lived experience. And then I want to ask you also about what it was like to watch Kali's film and kind of some of the themes that you saw connecting the two. But first, I wanted to start with, because I'm a law professor who teaches criminal law, I can't help but start with talking about felony murder rule, which was the reason, my understanding is that's the reason you were incarcerated for so long. And also the role of clemency, which is the reason that you're here with us today. Could I just ask on the felony murder rule, at what point did you realize that how the felony murder rule worked and that it was largely responsible for transforming your sentence from, say, a 5-year sentence, maybe 10, right? 5 to 10-year sentence to an 80-year sentence. And was that part of your motivation to get involved with the educational piece of helping your fellow incarcerees understand legal issues?
Well, I found out early on that felony murder was very impactful in my receiving an 80-year life sentence. In fact, I spent a lot of time in the law library trying to dissect the legal jargon and trying to understand the law. When I realized that most of the petitions to the court were failing, when I realized that no one was really trying to listen, that it looked like this was going to be the end all be all, what I did is I decided to submerge myself inside of education to be able to prevent other young men and young women who would come through the system, to prevent them from being treated the same way. I took it real personal because I thought that it's unfair for a child to come through the system for a mistake, a bad mistake, mind you. You have to answer for crime and criminal behavior, I understand. But what the governor understood was that there is a new law concerning the brain development of youth. And because of that, he felt that there was some leniency that was warranted, because I wasn't a career criminal. I was just a child that made a bad decision and then threw my entire life, off course. I was destined for college. I was enrolled, preparing for orientation at New York Institute of Technology in Central Islip, Long Island. And everything just went crazy. When I made the decision to want to be a drug dealer and got in over my head, didn't understand all of the components that went along with it. I wasn't a willing player. Drug teams faced off and things just went crazy, and bam, just in the blink of an eye, I ended up with, surrendering my life basically. The beautiful thing too is that when my attorney, Steve Zeidman, actually did an investigation, he found that the judge was biased and was racist. That's something that I never knew. He vowed to give enough numbers in sentencing to defendants that came into his courtroom more than judges that preceded him and any judges that were to come after him. He vowed that he would have the largest number that in the history of that particular county, that nobody will be able to match it. That weighed heavy too in the decision to get clemency, because it was basically African American and Latinos, Native Americans, so on and so forth, Asians, and things of that nature that will come before and get, get the blunt force of that bias and that prejudice. And that also weighed heavy because no one knew that he was racist, and that he was actually taking his power that the people actually had given to him by voting him into office and abusing it in that way. Meanwhile, all of my appeals and everything have been denied. Things started to look hopeless, and I wanted to educate myself, because one of the things that I realized is that it was a lack of education that led me into the prison system. If I would have known about the felony murder rule, if I would have known about so many different things as a child, trust me, I wouldn't have veered off into that type of lifestyle, but because of my ignorance, which I refused to be ignorant during the term of my stay in prison, I ended up in that situation. So I started to educate myself, and then I started to build programs for all of the youth that were coming in. And then after that, I expanded it to more than just youth. And I was determined just to leave a legacy behind, saying if this is it for me, it won't be it for the rest of the youth that come behind me. And miraculously, just out of the blue, I don't know how it happened, but the governor took notice, and here I am, and I'm just happy to be here.
Thank you for sharing that. So knowledge of the law was a hindrance at the beginning, and it actually helped you recognize that clemency is an option that you had on the table and that you ought to pursue. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and well, let me for clarity's sake too, I didn't qualify. They call me the miracle of New York State. I didn't qualify by any means. It was heavily spiritual. I always say that God was the one in control of this, because I had two friends, and one was saying, you have to file for clemency. And I kept telling him, I don't meet the criteria for clemency. What are you talking about? I'm going to get an attorney, and I'm going to put in another petition. And even though everything is almost exhausted, and he was like, I'm telling you, I got a strong feeling that you can definitely pull this off. And I was like, okay. And I brushed him away. Anthony Dixon, who was the first guy that you saw interviewed, was a very, very close friend and mentor of mine, so actually got me involved with that. He told me after he was released that he says, I don't know, there's a clause here in the law that says that for exceptional circumstances, the governor can make an exception for certain people. He says, you are that exception. I was like, I don't know about that. And I just submitted my paperwork. I did a lot of footwork because I knew that you can't be considered if you have violent crimes. I know you couldn't be considered unless you were 2 years from being paroled seeing the parole board. I didn't meet the criteria by any. I had 45 more years to do, and that was like historical in and of itself. But the thing that really broke the mantle was I had mailed. I was just telling Mark and Eleanor this yesterday that I had something woke me up in the middle of the night and told me to mail in my dissertation draft to the governor's office. I'm always thinking outside the box. I'm never doing what everybody else is doing. I'm canvassing, asking other potential candidates for clemency. What did you do? Where did you go wrong? What did your attorney tell you? How did your attorney strike out? I need to know. I'm closing up gaps. I'm doing my own investigation. I'm losing weight. I'm and I'm putting paperwork together. This evening, for some reason, a voice got me up in the middle of the night and said, put it in envelopes in a certified mail now. When I was released, the young lady that opened my mail told me she pulled out the envelope and saw a dissertation draft based on post-secondary education and its effects on rehabilitation for those who are incarcerated. And she read it, and the governor's counselor was sitting on the side, and he said, what did you just say? He said, let me see that. And she said, I handed it to him. And he said, who is this guy? He's trying to be a doctor in his cell? And he picked up the phone. And he went after the Department of Correctional Services because apparently somebody on the other end told him he didn't qualify. So he said, I'm the one who tells you who qualifies. You don't tell me who qualifies. Send me his file right now. And he slammed the phone down. And then the gate swung open. And I remember that day vividly because they called me down to the counseling unit and everybody was running. And then the counselors were coming by pointing, that's him. this is him. You know what I mean? Is that him? I want to talk to him, you know, and everybody was asking me for information because they didn't have a file. They had written me off. They didn't have a file on me. So they said, do you have anything? Because this is way beyond the superintendent. I don't know who it is, but they want a file on you, you know, and that's when I knew that it was actually happening, you know, but for all practical purposes, I did not meet the criteria for clemency. Nothing short of a miracle. I know that's why I'm here.
That's amazing. So one note for the audience, I mentioned Hawaii does have a problem. Hawaii does not have the felony murder rule right now, one of 2 states. So, and the felony murder rule, for those of you who are not lawyers or law students, basically says that if you are part of a felony where there's a death that happens in the course of the felony, you could be responsible for the murder without the prosecution having to prove intent. So it's a way of upgrading a robbery, for example, or a felony drug deal to a murder without the prosecution having to do what it has to do in all other cases. So Hawaii does not have that. So if that had happened here, you would have been released much sooner. So many wonderful things to talk about. And one thing I want to do is try to draw connections. And Kaori, I have a question for you in that regard. So one thing that Roy alluded to was the role of race and ethnicity and disproportionate, and this was in the film as well, right? Disproportionate incarceration of Blacks and Latinos in the New York system, and Native Americans you mentioned also. In your film, there was one particular man who mentioned his Korean ethnicity as being part of the path, but for all of them, there was a sense that they all had trauma, but they all had struggles. Some of them had serious financial struggles that were clear. The boy who was at home at age 4 by himself, right? Were some of those struggles related to factors in Japanese society that could be seen as analogous to the U.S. having problems with racialized incarceration?
Yes, we don't have really a statistics targeting ethnicity, but I tend to see, not whole a lot, but some South Koreans residents in Japan, Koreans in Japan, and also Rakumin, which is like outcast in Japanese society, is some minorities and some LGBTQ people too. These minorities have been kind of excluded in many privileges that we have as general Japanese residents. And that's not really talked about widely in the society. And when you come to prison, that's where you see it really like, and I mean, but unless the people who are incarcerated speak up, you wouldn't know a lot of times. But if you see the names of inmates, then you know if you are Koreans. The Rakumin, you don't know because ethnically they're Japanese. But minority is the ethnic minority you can see from the names. But the thing is, in Japanese society in general, a lot of Koreans in Japanese society try to change their names. Or legally, if you change the legal names, then you become citizens, right? But because we have a problem of World War II, we have exploited a lot of Asian people outside Japan, and we actually forced Koreans and Chinese, some Chinese people to Japan, so that they had to change to Japanese names during World War II. And then after World War II, they are kind of forced to change back to their names. But this kind of things, it's very complicated. And second, third generations, they have a different views. And a lot of them don't have the history, they don't know anything about the history too. So in society in general, Koreans in Japan, that kind of like a descendants who came with the forced labor thing, that they have Japanese names. They use the Japanese names, but legally their last name is Korean. So if you don't disclose I'm Korean, unless they say that, people wouldn't know because we have a similar feature. I'm almost saying like some Koreans think I am Korean, right? So, but if you come to prisons, they force you to use your real legal name. So although you are, for instance, using your last name as Japanese in a society, but if your name will totally like changed into Koreans while you were incarcerated. So that kind of things happens, and I see it. And that guy in the film also lives under different Japanese name in the society, but his name, as soon as he comes into the prison, his name has changed, and he has to identify himself with the name that he never ever used in the society. So that kind of thing is happening, and also the guy was saying, he cannot become like a fireman or like a public officer or teachers. That kind of thing, it took him like a year almost to disclose that. I mean, his name was obviously Korean in a prison, but he never talked about his ethnicity or his problem associated with his background until like a year later. And also I saw a couple brought me too, and that happens too. Not a year, but a few months it took for them to really deeply talk about how they were discriminated against in the society. And I don't think any other units of PC unit kind of makes you talk really in depth. But other units, I'm sure they don't talk about it. It's shame, and it's like a behind the bars thing, you know. So that's the kind of thing that the TC tries to kind of make you reflect what's going on, like a social, like a structural violence kind of thing that we never really pay attention is all of a sudden brought up, but it takes time for them to really face it. And I think that's educational for other inmates too, because they never pay attention to those things. It's, oh, so you are Korean. Oh, you're treated like that. You're discriminated. I didn't know that, kind of thing.
That's interesting. Thank you. So, Roy, when you think about the TC program that you saw depicted in the first film, let me say what one reaction I had is, and I want to ask if you had a similar reaction to this and what your other reactions were. One reaction I had that was striking about the film that Cowie made was that the TC program appears to be very centralized. Like there are resources that are being devoted by the administration, right, by the bureaucracy to provide individual and group therapeutic treatment to these incarcerees. And then what we saw was really a result of that dedication and resource allocation. But at PACT, it seems like the resources come from two places. One, self-generated amongst the leadership organization amongst the incarcerees, and then with the external partnership of Yale. But the prison itself is not providing any such services. Is that reaction accurate? And how did you feel watching the kind of centralized TC program in your experience?
There's a partial truth to that, in the sense that there are resources that are being devoted to certain programs inside of New York State prisons. For example, we have alcohol substance abuse treatment. You might have a GED program, you have a vocational program, you might have anger management, and so on. But there's not a therapeutic program that's dealing with the intricacies of the personality of the individual. As I sat here and I watched the film, it really impacted me, because one thing that I do know is that now I know that what PAC and Yale actually have is actually an international, universal type of solution to the criminal problem. What I mean is that one of the things that I watched in the film was that all of the Japanese men were told to sit in a circle and actually start to elaborate on their lives. That's something that we did in PAC. What I found myself doing as the president is I would take something that they call cognitive therapy and logotherapy. Logotherapy was developed by Viktor Frankl. He's a psychiatrist, and cognitive therapy, behavior therapy, was developed by Albert Ellis. And I would take them and I combine them because I had to do that for myself. I'm not just coming from a therapeutic point of view of from in the book, because they'll bring people into the prison system that can teach the book, but once I put myself through the grinder and I became a better person, I refused to sit back and allow everyone else just to remain the same. So when I put myself through it and I got educated and realized what it was that I did to myself, I actually started to build programs around that. And it actually entailed some of what happened in this film. It was very powerful for me because I knew that I was onto something when I had groups and I had hardcore gang members sitting in front of me and they would cry. And you don't get guys that are tough that just cry. That they have a macho thing that they have to protect. They manhood, manliness, you know what I mean? I'm not letting this out here. I can't let all these people see how I feel. And, when I was able to pull that out, I knew that there was a form of therapy taking place that the prison wasn't offering. And the fact that the recidivism rate for the United States is actually hovering over 60% is a sign that something is failing. And it was that failure that I wanted to try to capitalize off of in that pack and Yale actually merged together to try to prevent from happening over and over again. And indeed, like you said, it is a participatory program. There are no resources for us except through the copy machine with the copy guy who was talking about. He's the major copy guy. That's Little Lou. He actually makes the copies. We charge 10 cents for each page, and a portion of that goes towards the program to sustain it. It was Yale who actually helped us institute that. And that's how we pay for our program. Outside of that, there are no bureaucratic entities. There's no one actually trying to fund the program. But the program is showing results because what happens is we have an impact on the prison. We require certain individuals to want to change in order to come through the organization and become a member. And we find out who is who through the programs, the classes, and the groups that we actually incorporate. And that's how we actually go about doing the program. The sad thing is that we don't have PAC in every prison. One of my dreams, Eleanor and I was speaking about this yesterday, would be to take the PAC paradigm and to incorporate it throughout all the prisons in New York State. And then after that, if we can go internationally and do the same thing. The cultures are different, but the humanity is the same. The thing is that you see these men, they have a different language, they have a different type of method inside of prison. They walk with their hands like this, they have to sit down on cue and, okay, that's the culture. But these are human beings, and if you watch them, they cry the same way the gang members would cry in front of me when I'm teaching a group. They'll speak about the abuse that they had as children. They would speak about the neglect and something that interfered with the thinking process that need to be addressed that the United States prison system in New York State, I'm gonna say the United States because the recidivism rate is so high, is not addressing. So you let them go and they have a vocational trade. They have a GED, and then when they get there and get hired for a job, the intricacies of their personality hasn't been dealt with. So when the boss comes and say, no, you have to, and then they jump up and want to choke the boss out, because those issues haven't been dealt with. That's what I wanted to deal with. So I tried to get inside of their heart, their souls, and their minds. Cognitive behavior says that you deal with the thoughts, the emotions, and feelings of the individual. Help them to pinpoint the problem, and then you can correct the behavior. And that's what I was trying to do. So you're right, it's not funded by the system. It's a participatory program, and I'm just thankful for Yale being there to help us along to bring about real rehabilitation. And that's what stood out with me with the governor as well.
So the healing process sounds quite similar, but formulated in totally different ways. One of the most striking moments for me of your film, Kaori, was the scene when they're engaging in group therapy. And it was so powerful the way that the other prisoners could empathize with the uncle and the spouse or girlfriend. And even he started crying after talking about the abortion of the woman who he was playing. I mean, the emotional, the capacity for empathy was just so amazing. And it strikes me that those are talking about, right, gang members opening up for the first time and doing that processing seems like a real theme. But that was such a powerful moment. Were you surprised? Were you surprised, Calorie, when were you filming that yourself?
Yeah, my cameraman was filming, but I was with him, and I wasn't surprised at all because funny thing is that I think even in the United States, you have a different culture and different like culture of prisons, the corrections. That we learned from this therapeutic community model from the United States. Actually, there's a foundation, Amity Foundation, which is they have a headquarter in Arizona, but they have now branches all over California inside the prisons. So I made a film called Lifers Reaching for Life Beyond the Walls in 2004. That's about them. And actually, the person who, the corporate person, but who was just assigned to bid on prison projects, watched Lifers at the theater, and he was really moved. So he included the TC program in the new prison, which turned out to be this. And so actually my film on the American prison in California was turned into the Japanese TC. Yeah, interesting, right?
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's true. And what I was trying to say, so I've already seen enough of what Roy was saying, that really macho guy, like breaking down and crying and started talking about abuse issues and like sexual molestation, all that stuff. I've seen like 20 years of Amity because I made it through 2 documentary television programs on them and lifers. So I spent like quite a bit of time with them. Yeah, and even I'm not making film. I'll go into Amity program and spend some time with these guys and stuff. So I know what you're talking about, truly. And then, so when I saw the Japanese prison, actually, the process was slower than Americans because culturally we're different. Yes, like Americans are more expressive. I mean, I'm just making a general like term, but this is my impression that you have like a faster pace of change transformation, and also Amity has more time in the programs. Like in Shimane Asahi, they only allow 12 hours a week for program, and Amity, which is like maybe 3 times as much, so they have more time to talk, right? So when I saw the Japanese TC, I was like, wow, this is slow, where does it get, like when, so I know actually in my mind that that would have a kind of same effect with the Amity program, but the matter is just the time. So the reason I put 2 years for filming was because I kind of knew that it would take longer than the U.S. So I wasn't surprised at all.
Wow. It's so neat that your film projects overlapped without even the intentionality that the first one led to the second. So Roy, you mentioned earlier one of your goals is to scale this project, right? To build it out beyond one place and eventually basically make it limitless. And I wanted to put on kind of like a business person's hat and think, what's the model? Like how could you, because I think if it required Roy at every place, it would take significant resources to find the Roys in every place, right? How do we create a model that could be adopted and scaled to places without your intimate involvement and without finding the Roys?
So I'm definitely going to try and incorporate some of the Yale students who have gone on with their lives but have participated in the program. So get ready, Mark, get ready, Ellen, and call them back to actually help along those lines as a foundation to get started and springboard into the program. But overall, what I would plan to do is I would like to pull those who go through the PAC program and organization inside, because what I started to do was train them. before I left to make sure that the paradigm remains the same. So those who will go through the program, they can come out and gain a form of employment and dedicate their lives to helping those who are less fortunate. The way that I did for them, they can do for others. And we can grow that. Because if we can incorporate a program in different states along those lines and have pack here, pack there, pack, then there's a cadre of people coming out who have been changed and transformed through the paradigm and can make their contribution. And then slowly we can start chipping away at the legs of Goliath, so to speak, and maybe that's how we can try to turn the paradigm. But that will be the plan for me, to actually have everyone, come through inside, land in my lab, outside, and then dispatch and go abroad to teach the same that I have taught to all of them.
So how much do you need to know? So let's say Mark, you talk to Mark at 5 o'clock, and Mark and 5 of our law students say, it's time to do this right here. Is that enough? I mean, how much do you need to start this kind of program?
Wow. So I never did dollars and cents, but I will tell you this. If Mark has 5 students on deck from Yale or here in the University of Hawaii and he says, let's go, then we can actually take a prison one at a time. You know what I mean? And we can outline the blueprint and dispatch and go to those prisons and do what needs to be done. And I would train them up the same way I would train the guys inside up and get them familiar with logotherapy, cognitive behavior, the non-traditional approach to criminal social justice, which is very important because it pinpoints the failure of the system, not addressing those community-specific problems that exist. And we can start to deal with that. And then we can take on the PICS, the post-incarceration syndrome as well. You know what I mean? And once we do that in each prison and we start to build the organizations in each prison, then we can have a group of people that will start to come out and they also can gain employment and they'll start and then the numbers will expand. And I know that this is good and this is so. I actually have a friend who was incarcerated with me and he had come home and did the same thing for another program. And now he has $10 million at his disposal just from creating the reentry program and setting up a computer lab for the men when they come home, teaching them job interviewing skills, getting them educated, giving them he just bought a hotel and now he lets everybody who come out that do not have a place to stay, they go into the hotel and then he finds them a job, so it's doable. And he started alone in a small room in a church, so I'm pretty sure if he started alone in the church, I can probably move a little bit faster with Mark and Yale behind me. So that's exactly how I would actually go about doing it.
Very cool. Okay, in a minute, I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. I'm going to ask one last question for Coward. After 2 years of doing that, and at the end, right, we see people upon release and the group session every 3 months and the barbecue, and I think those were wonderful scenes. I wanted to ask though about you personally, right? Having spent so much time with these people, is it hard to kind of think about your future film projects? Do you feel like you need to stay connected with all these people in their journeys, or is it easy to let them kind of go off and explore their lives and move on to your next project?
I'm still being friends with some of them. Not always they will come to me after the incarceration, like I'm being released, but 4 protagonists, out of 4 protagonists, 3 of them are in touch with me, and I try to help them, but they try to help me too, like a vice versa kind of thing. So we're kind of developing friendship. And some of the guys who were not protagonists, but in the film, but it's hard to recognize for you because all the faces are disguised. But some of them are doing really good, like making their own company, restaurants, open up. And some of them even offering the new, like a DC graduates to join their business, and it's informal. Everything is informal because the system doesn't allow you to associate even. They prohibit actually associating with each other even after being released.
Wow.
Yeah. So so it's kind of under the table kind of thing, but it's not illegal or anything. So I encourage them to get in touch with each other and try to help them, help each other. And even under COVID, we've been doing online, like a Zoom talking circles every month or every 2 months. And number of participation is like getting less, but still, I think there's a space that they can come to. And what's really interesting is that we have a Facebook like a page, but totally closed. If you're a member, you can see it, but otherwise you cannot see it from outside. But some of them have a really serious like illness issue. Some people have a tendency of self-harming or theft issues, dependency issues, all kinds of issues, right? But once a person declares like I'm having a trouble, and then like 30 or 20 other members will like say something very nice, and at the same time at least like a couple guys will like go and try to seek try to give the help to them, like making call, asking for drinking, inviting dinners, something like that. So they're always networking informally. And that's something that I think is really important after being released if we don't have any proper place to support them. And I think the TC is the only, the Shimane Asahi is the only place which provides this kind of informal support networking system. And it's not system, but the informal kind of connections. And I think, everybody, like Minister of Justice should learn, from them that how to keep supporting each other. They are the ones who, lived experiences is very crucial for them, and they learn such a positive relationship inside the TC that they try to keep growing and outside. And Ministry of Justice is not interested in that, but that's the key. That's really the key component.
So you two are saying very similar things in that
Yeah.
regard, right? Building upon what's
Oh,
been
yeah.
learned and keeping that community vibrant after release. Yeah.
And I'm an independent filmmaker, but I also chair the nonprofit organization called Out of Frame. It also helped not only creating a film, but also we do some artworks, like trying to reach out the family members of incarcerated or drug people with drug issues and domestic violence issues. So we try to keep in touch with them, not only just making film. And I try to involve them there after making the film. I try to reach out to them in many different ways, but some of them, like some protagonists, come to the screening sessions and they will talk. Yeah. And that's been really helping them too. And also they're helping our film to be spread too. So that's vice versa. Relationship.
Okay, I have a bunch more questions, but I'm gonna be unselfish for a few moments and just see what questions people have.
And we've got mics available, so actually Keiko's got a mic, Kawari-san, why don't you keep your mic? And then
Okay.
Keiko's on the mic, if anyone has a question. And please introduce yourself. And we also have one from the internet before we hear.
Hello. Hi, my name is Edward. I'm currently a 1L at this law school. And I just wanted to ask both of you a question. So I think everyone in this room probably agrees that reforms need to be made to the criminal justice system and the way that we treat prisoners. But I think politically it's a very sort of difficult task to sort of convince people that these reforms are needed both in Japan and in America. And what would you say to people in order to like bring them to our side, to convince them that these are really needed and that these will really be beneficial to society? Or maybe I think the buzzword is tough on crime? What would you say to those people in order to properly advocate for prison reform?
So I would say that the individuals that are in prison, majority of them are going to return to the community. So how do you want the individual to return to your community? You know, if we're dealing with broken individuals who need help, why not get involved in the system to give them help? Surely they might not be considered the best of the best. Maybe they are the least, but something is inside of them that can be fixed. I always had a theory when I was inside. I had the category A incarcerated person and the category B. And that was my own personal thing. In the category A's, you have those who are usually destitute, indigent, come from impoverished environments, and their crimes are usually focused around economics. The category B incarcerated people are those, in my mind, were some of my neighbors, like serial killers and things of that nature, hitmen for hire, and some of the career criminals that don't want to get fixed. This is what they do until they get to the grave. They are the minority. The majority are just hurting from poverty, physical abuse, sexual abuse, lack of education, ignorance, the crime-generative factors that Eddie Ellis had mentioned in the non-traditional approach, and Larry Luke White had mentioned, that Mario Castro mentioned in the video, was that there are crime-generative factors, family breakdown, racism, uneducation, undereducation, employment, underemployment, welfare, illegal hustling, self-esteem issues. That was a big one for me, to the point where even during the film with the Japanese men, you can even see that some of them said, I don't want to sit up here and seem like I'm a coward. I don't want to, this is a result of peer pressure. Peer pressure launched me into the criminal world because I had an ego problem. Where did this come from? Where did my low self-esteem come from? How did this happen? What type of environment that I grew up in that would allow me to say that, okay, I will commit a crime to keep my ego up here and to keep my reputation and respect up here? These are things that we can work through. So what I would tell the community is that you determine how you want the individuals to return, because majority of them will return. And if you put a hand inside of the system to correct it, then the society is better, the communities are better, and we can all build and move forward. So that's what I would pose. That's how I would try to galvanize. And it's actually happening, because a lot of people are actually starting to wake up. President Obama wanted to put cameras inside of all interrogation rooms throughout the country at some point, because he knew something's going down in the interrogation room that's very illegal. It didn't happen, but that was one of the most powerful moves, because I can't begin to tell all of you the stories. Remember, I lived this. This is not just book knowledge. I lived this. I can't begin to tell you what goes on in those interrogation rooms. I can't begin to tell you what goes on inside of the prison in the way of death and having handcuffs put on certain individuals and thrown downstairs, and then they call their family and say, oh, we were trying to restrain him. He slipped, hit his head. Sorry. And they really threw him down the stairs. There's so many different things that happen. And everybody keeps telling me, you have to write this book. You have to write this book, because it's a reality that a lot of people are not aware of. But slowly but surely, the society is becoming aware, So that's what I would tell the community. How do you want the individual to return? That's very important.
The only thing I would add is stay tuned for the next couple of panels, because I think that topic will be discussed in particular coming up. So, I want to ask, if we have Q&A from the online audience, I don't want to cut them out. Justice McKenna, were you about to raise your hand? I saw you.
Go ahead with the audience.
We've got 10 more minutes, so let's go to Justice McKenna, and I'll make a comment, so I can just read it.
Thank you so much to both of you. Kaori, you had mentioned Burakumin, and I'm just curious. Burakumin, for the people that are not aware, are the traditional outcast castes from the feudal system in Japan. But do you think that the Burakumin are overrepresented within the prison? Do you have any sense of? My understanding is that maybe like 1 to 2 to 3% of the entire population of Japan is, traditionally from Japan. But what is it in the prison, from what you can tell? And what in terms of the ijime, the bullying, why were those people being bullied? Because they were poor or what's, as children, the ones that you were following? What were the reasons for what were they being bullied? Because of, they were poor or what?
Thank you. About Brahmin, it's very difficult to identify if they are or they're not because, like I said, they're not ethnically minority and their names are the same as the rest of the society. So unless they say, I'm from Brago, you wouldn't know. And there's no statistics in a prison. But my sense is, yes, represented. My sense, just what I saw in TC. And I just published a book about the prison circle. And in there, I dedicated one chapter on this particular XTC member. Actually, I could say, I guess, in this film, he's there, the one who said in the park, in a group of released, he said, I'm going to try out for college. He was from that. And he didn't tell me for a year or a year and a half that he was from there. And the way I got to know he was from there is because I asked him, because I knew him for like a couple of years before I asked him to be on the film. And I was originally going to ask him to be one of the protagonists. So I said, well, he wasn't in prison back then, he was already out. I said, can I follow you around and can I film you? He said, I'd like to help you out, but no. And he said, because I'm Bragumi. And I said, oh, I didn't know. So, but he agreed upon being on the film and also he agreed to be interviewed. So there's an extensive interview in my book in Japanese, so you cannot read. But anyway, so that's how to answer to your question. And the ijime, the bullying is huge. I will say there's no one single person who hasn't been affected by ijime for maybe for 35, 40 years, because I'm one of them who was really bullied, and I call it, in Japanese society, we call lynching, but lynch here has a different connotation, but I was beaten up by 15 kids, really badly. Yeah, it was like, it traumatized me, yeah, and the whole life. And the reason I'm doing this type of work has a lot to do with my experience as a victim of bullying, yeah. So when this Ken talked about bullying experiences, it's not just him. I mean, almost all of these guys have that sort of like experience. Just the level of bullying was really, obvious for him. That's why I picked his story. But everybody has talked about a little bit or something about that. So everybody is influenced by it. And the reason why they were bullied, multiple reasons, but maybe no reason. It's just a stress that our society has. This is my theory. So it's just, okay, it's not right answer or the wrong answer, but this is what I experienced, actually lived experience, I guess, that my society is very, very stressful. And, I was my mom wanted me to live a very well, like a good life, but in a way she put me and my two brothers into a very overly educated, how can I say, enforcing the type of education that she wants. So I used to play violin, I used to play piano, I did all kinds of like after school activities which I didn't want to, and I was always stressed out. And the kids, my friends were always like that too. And the pressure of going into a good high school and good college and good getting a good job is like the thing, and it has always been. But my generation, I guess, was one of the really hardest one. It's changing a little bit, but not so much, right? So the school bullying is awful and affecting everybody because of that type of lifestyle is affecting everybody. And I think we manage, the reason I'm not in a prison is because I had an opportunity to come to the United States and went to Latin America. I went to travel all over the world to meet different type of people and ideas. And I have a film to express myself. I have other tools. That's it. And I have a very similar background with these people actually. What I didn't, what I haven't told you yet is that I'm a member of a family member of incarcerated, and actually I came out in my book that my brother was in prison for 10 months. At the time of filming Prison Circle. It was what? Exactly. So that type of thing, like maybe back to your question, I can say that through my film, I'm not focusing on prison actually. I'm trying to let the audience see themselves in the film, like in those protagonists, because in different degrees, but everybody can identify with something about them, right? And because United States, you have so many people in the prison, like 2 million, 3 million people, right?
Yeah.
So you should, I mean, have somebody, like your friends or your family members, incarcerated before. That's very normal kind of experience, right? But in Japan, people don't talk about it. I mean, if you have a family member in prison, forget it. We never talk about it, right? So that kind of different environment makes us a different situation. So through films, I let the people see what's hidden in my society, and so to generate people's discussion. And also I disclose my experience in my book because here I am. I'm also one of them. I'm not in prison, but my brother was in there when I was filming this. And it was actually really hard filming two completely different models. I would go to see my brother when he was in prison, and when I was in a visiting room, I mean, just being watched by a guard in a very tiny room, and the guard would take notes for every word I would say. And only 15 minutes for visitation. I drove like 2.5 hours on one way, so 5 hours for two ways, and 15 minutes, and I had to wait another 1 hour to get the clearance, right? So, and the next day I'll go to Shimane, and people are talking, I mean, in TC and crying. My brother was like, not allowed to speak anything really. I mean, being watched 15 minutes, what can you talk about? And he will say like, Kaori, I'm so hopeless. There's nothing that I have hope to keep living. It's like, what would I have to, what can I say? I always like stumble, if you die, I'll be sad. Things like that is something that I could say, but that was so minimal. And then next day I'll go flying to Shimane Asahi, and I'll see those people speaking about the experience that they have, being discriminated, being bullied, being abused, but at the same time they're talking about their hope, like what would they want to do outside. So two totally different models. I was like a tormented. So that's what I can say to both of you. Thank you.
Do you want to read your there's a comment from online.
So we have a comment from online, but I also, I'll go there in a second, but I want to thank our panelists, I want to thank our moderator. This has been just as amazing as I thought it would be. So thank you to you guys. The comment that we got, and I'm sharing this with, we mailed back and got permission, but this is, so we're in Greenhaven today. So we got a note from Kenya Thorpe. And so my name is Kenya Thorpe. My husband is Delroy Thorpe. He is the vice president of PACT at Greenhaven. He was able to hear a part of the audio of the documentary, and he said it sounds very powerful. He is proud to be able to be a part of this amazing program and process the PAC team is very excited to be able to view the documentary soon. So Sarah wrote and let her know that we would be reading it. She said thanks back, so I feel comfortable sharing that. And I just, Kenya, if you were still here, we so much appreciate your comment, and we're so glad we can be doing this. Delroy, if you are listening or will hear this in the future, we so much are glad that you could be a part of this today too. So we're gonna take a break. We'll take a break for 10 minutes so we can try to stay reasonably on schedule. So just a little bit past 2:30, you're gonna be hearing from me again. Thank you.